Well, what off-season? Sidney Crosby was on the ice, and Kyle Dubas had a little salt. I am Dan Kingerski on the Pittsburgh Hockey Now platforms, YouTube and Facebook. So Kyle Dubas had his year-end presser on Monday, and it went over 30 minutes, like 35-minute long press conference. It was a tour de force, there's no question about that. But buried within Dubas's standard talking points were several nuggets of truth we want to get to, several important nuggets. He started off a little tepid, a little unsure of how to answer the Mike Sullivan question, which I thought was a little bit interesting. My ears perked up. I kind of leaned into it, like, are we going to hear some real news? But by the end of Kyle Dubas's answer, he had kind of more or less acquiesced to the fact that Sullivan will be back. He did leave the door open that, Sullivan and Dubas will meet on Tuesday to just go over everything. And by the end of Dubas's answer, there was really no wiggle room there that Mike Sullivan will begin next season as the Penguins coach, unless Sullivan has a great change of heart from last Friday when he very firmly said he will be the coach next season. So we can put that to bed. You can also sort of put a little bit of the Genny Malkin stuff to bed, as Dubas really kind of gave Malkin a bit of a pass in so much as saying, boy, you're being kind, in saying that Malkin had to play with a lot of wingers, a rotating cast, and he did. You go down the list from slumping Michael Bunting, and you can't even remember half of them, right? Philip Tomasino had sort of a very quiet year beside him, and Blake Lizotte had some time, and Kevin Hayes had some time, and eventually Danton Heinen had some time. Basically, the only person who didn't play on Genny Malkin's wing was, Sidney Crosby. So let's dive into, I think, the big topic, the one that really jumped out at me on Monday, was the criticism of Erik Karlsson. Now, it wasn't name-calling or overt, didn't put him down. But what Dubas said about Carlson, and perhaps if Carlson had any frustrations, was his actions must match his ambitions. In other words, if Erik Karlsson wants to win, he has to be better. He went through Erik Karlsson's inconsistencies, preparation, and how he did play this season. But he also, like a lot of us, was wowed by Carlson at the Four Nations tournament in Boston and Montreal, the Four Nations thing. And he's like, it would be hard for anybody not to watch him in the tournament and think this guy can help us not only win, or this guy can not only help us contend, but win. It was damning praise of the Penguins defenseman. I'm not quite sure how much of that will carry over. It could just be two guys. Carlson vented a little frustration on Friday. Dubas had a little salt on Monday. Like, if you're unhappy, we'll do something about it. That could be the end of it. Or this very well could be the beginning of a bit of a rocky relationship between the two parties, because let's be honest, the way Dubas spoke in the future tense of next season, we need this, we need that from Carlson, it surely seems, and you can certainly extrapolate, that there isn't a lot of trade opportunity. There aren't exactly teams lining up to take Erik Karlsson, especially with all the inconsistencies that he showed this season. He had 53 points, which isn't terrible, certainly well below his capability, in 82 games. Was it 7 goals and 47 assists, or I guess 46 assists, whatever it was, 53 points, 82 games. That's all Carlson chipped in. And there was a hint of salt in Dubas's voice, with that his actions have to match his ambitions. It wasn't overt and it wasn't aggressive. It was certainly there. A couple other notes that you'll want to get to from the Erik, or not the Erik Karlsson press conference, but the Kyle Dubas presser, is he made, in no uncertain terms, he circled the defense as the major area of concern. I mean, it's kind of stating the obvious, right? That Penguins defense was one of, if not the absolute worst in the league. The lack of things that they did well certainly contributed to a spiraling team. And to that point, I think the goaltender conversation also ties in to the defense, because Dubas did cite Owen Pickering, Harrison Brunick, who's, he said, playing very well in the last few games with Wilkes-Barre. Also, he circled Jack St. Ivany, as they want to see him come back. They want to see him make another push for the NHL roster. So there's 3 defensemen that they've circled. Dubas did challenge Pickering a bit. He didn't give him a free pass, and he said he wants to see Pickering come back next season and push harder. He wants to see him push for 18, 19, 20 minutes a game, not the 13 or 14 that he was getting. A little bit of, again, a little more subtle criticism, I thought, of Pickering. I don't know that it was entirely warranted, but I think there was an underlying tone of just a wee bit of frustration with Dubas, because this season should not have gone as poorly as it did. Now, they were never set up to win the Stanley Cup this season, but they certainly weren't set up to be last in the Eastern Conference at multiple points, or next to last, deep into the season. And if anybody has some optimism over how the Penguins played in those last 16, right, I guess, 17 games when they were 10-5-2, Dubas said, don't be distracted by that. He's looking at the entire body of work, the entire season. So I suppose we have our answer on what to think, or what we might extrapolate over the finishing kick for a second straight season. Dubas was having none of that. He kind of put that to bed in his opening remarks. I've got a ton. I've got 4 pages of notes here. By the way, the Dallas Stars, they're so happy to have media coverage in Dallas. Then we went there a couple weeks ago. They gave out notebooks and pens. It was like reporter heaven. The last thing we should note is how the Penguins are going to spend their salary cap space. And Dubas didn't use the word salary dump, nor did he use the word RFA, or restricted free agent. Instead, he just described exactly what they were in terms of what kind of trade you're going to look for the Penguins this season. They're going to try to acquire players that their teams can no longer afford. It's a salary dump, or it's a player that the other team wants to move on from. The other kind of free agents he talked about were signing players whose teams could no longer afford them. Well, that's an RFA. That's a restricted free agent. And he did reference when he said when St. Louis did it last year. Again, he didn't reference offer sheets, qualifying offers, or any sort of that stuff specifically, but he essentially did. So look for the Penguins. So if you want to start circling names on the RFA board, I think that would be a good place to start, as well as maybe some usable pieces who might not fit where they are. I think that's exactly where the Penguins are right now. Do not look for them to sign any big-name free agents, although there was just a hint of wiggle room there. As Dubas said, he's not going to sign players in their early 30s who won't be around when the Penguins are ready to compete again. Yes, that also would kind of count Rickard Rakell and Brian Rust, but we'll set that aside. We'll do another conversation on that. So if you're looking at players in their early 30s, they're not going to pay big money to them because they won't be around. Well, that doesn't exclude players like Sam Bennett or Mitch Marner, this crop of potential 27, 28-year-old free agents who theoretically would, in fact, be around when the Penguins turn this around. Kyle Dubas also left little wiggle room on Sidney Crosby. Sid was pretty honest. He was kind of raw after the season on Friday. Nothing Sid said, should in any way enhance or refire speculation that the relationship could end. Crosby's a Penguin, period. And Dubas, I thought, maybe had the best answer to that to date when he said, well, we missed the playoffs for 3 straight seasons. Sid wants to win everything he does. And since Crosby was on the ice here Monday, skating with P.O. Joseph and Ryan Shea and Owen Pickering and Alex Nedeljkovic, they were all on the ice Monday after the season. He said, I expect Sid to be grumpy, to feel the toll of losing, because he so wants to win everything that he's ever done. And actually probably has won everything he's ever done. All right, that's it from the UPMC Lemieux Complex here in Cranberry. I won't have to head back here until July. The rookie camp will be the next time that we're here, unless there's a big breaking news press conference, which after today, I don't expect. Sorry, it is what it is. So from the complex, I'm Dan Kingerski on the Pittsburgh Hockey Now platforms. Have fun.